Hi there. A couple of years ago, I spent a weekend at a campground in upstate New York that happened to be a gathering place for the hippie New Age pagan crowd, and I had a lot of fun cooking big pots of food each night. Every night, I made a big pot of stew or soup, and they'd gobble it all down, except for one night when I made a big pot of pasta. Then suddenly everyone started turning their nose up and saying, "Oh, I'm gluten-free." From the number of people refusing to touch some delicious pasta just because it has gluten, you'd think there'd be some sort of epidemic of celiac disease or maybe a big conspiracy. And actually, that's true. There's a conspiracy by the so-called health food industry to create an imaginary food fad with the result of people imagining that they're eating more healthy by avoiding gluten. And of course, there's the gluten-free industry, which has reached the point where there's almost always every supermarket in America has a so-called gluten-free aisle, where food items are always a lot more expensive than the everyday foods we usually eat. And that's the reason why the stupid gluten-free fad exists. It's another example of companies cashing in on upper-class white privilege. However, unless you have genuine celiac disease and really are intolerant to gluten, you have nothing to worry about, and going gluten-free is about as worthless as the oat bran fad of the 1980s, or the no-carb fad of the 1990s, or the so-called organic fad going on today. Food fads like gluten-free give me a strong urge to indulge in these forbidden delights, which is why this dish is packed with as much gluten as possible, especially to offend those who have to resort to conspiracy theories and scare stories about the imaginary dangers of gluten. And one final question. Why can't we go to the supermarket and walk down the lactose-free aisle and see dozens of products with big labels saying lactose-free? After all, lactose intolerance is just as real as celiac disease, and unlike celiac, you can develop lactose intolerance as you grow older. Yet there isn't a big industry dedicated to promoting and selling lactose-free products.
Wheat gluten was developed in Asia, and it's meant especially for vegetarian and vegan dishes. It's the key ingredient in a meat substitute called seitan.
Here comes the gluten.
Though this dish would make any vegan run away screaming. Here, we're using gluten with meatballs and pasta sauce to make this sauce nice and thick so it isn't watery. Gluten is a protein that causes flour and wheat dough to become thick and elastic, and it's what makes pizza dough so stretchy. It's very good for use as a thickening agent, which is why we're using it here in a pasta sauce. It also tastes pretty good, and it has a sweet taste similar to wheat germ. It also helps to make these meatballs stick together, so they're easy to roll out. Many meatball recipes say to fry the meatballs before using them in pasta sauce, but I'm using a technique taught by my grandmother, which is simply to add them to the sauce uncooked, and they'll slow cook for 3 hours until they're well done and tasty. One good thing about gluten is it doesn't have a strong flavor of its own, and that's why we're mixing in mushrooms and peppers with this sauce, and especially Italian sweet sausages, so the wheat taste won't overwhelm it. We heat up an enameled cast iron pot and add 3 cans of crushed tomatoes. Then it's just a matter of stirring in our ingredients, including salt, pepper, garlic powder, a lot of oregano, and we mix in the vegetables. Plus, we add more gluten to the sauce to make it nice and thick. And now we mix in the sausages, then add the meatballs and stir it all together. Any kid will tell you there can never be too many meatballs in pasta sauce, and that certainly applies here. All we have to do now is cover the pot and let it simmer for 2 hours. Just stir the sauce every half hour or so. After 2 hours, the sauce is well cooked, and we just need to let it simmer uncovered for another hour to reduce the liquid and make it nice and thick. The gluten certainly helped make this a good thick sauce, and the meatballs are solid enough to cut apart. This is a sweet-tasting sauce that any Italian would enjoy, especially since we're using good old Italian pasta here, and not any of that ridiculous gluten-free pasta, which costs at least twice as much. We top our gluten pasta with gluten sauce and our gluten meatballs, and we have a delicious and fulfilling Seitan-ic meal that is as far from gluten-free as you can possibly get.
If you're a person genuinely intolerant to gluten due to celiac disease, you certainly have my condolences. However, the title of this video would likely keep many celiac persons from watching in the first place. But if you're following the imaginary gluten-free fad, and you think you're better than the rest of us because of it, then I have only one thing to say. Ha ha! Thank you for watching.